And here we are again. It is May 22nd. I can't even believe it. It is Memorial Day weekend, the beginning of Memorial Day weekend, and I did not even want to come into this office today. We had the most, beautiful birds in the backyard. Everything's popping, all of the trees, all of the flowers. You just want to, I don't know, just stay in your backyard. But you can't always do that, right? So,
got to serve the people.
Go ahead, Tecia. Yeah.
Got to serve the people. Got to come in and
serve the people. Yeah, it's all about the people. So here we are again. I am Rebecca Montrone of Wondrous Roots here in Keene, New Hampshire. I am a holistic health practitioner and herbalist, and I am very privileged to be in connection here with my wondrous colleagues, Dr. Jean Clerkin of Natural Health, and Drs. Tecia and Matt Abatelli of Cheshire Wellness. And we all have we're missing today Allison Millar, who is traditional Chinese medicine. She is a licensed acupuncturist, and she is actually away today. So we hope she's having a wonderful time. And we'll miss her on our round table, but we're going to really enjoy talking with each other, and I hope that you do too. If you're joining us, you can join us on Facebook live streaming. So we have our Proactive Health Collective of Keene Facebook page. So if you want to look for that, do. We're on this webinar on Zoom. So if you're on the Zoom option, you can go to the Q&A and you can type in if you have comments or questions, because we always interact with you during this time. When I was talking with my colleagues yesterday, we kind of talk about, or Wednesday, when we're kind of like, what do we want to talk about? And we thought, people's health was concerning them way before the COVID thing. And their same health concerns are there. And so we're like, could we just talk about, something that isn't COVID? And one of the things, the concepts that comes to all of us all the time is resilience, because you cannot control the weather. You can't control natural disaster. You can't control things like an epidemic or whatever. You can't control the fact that, you just found out your dearest loved one has cancer. You can't control these things, but you can't be jerked around by them, right? You can't just live in a constant knee-jerk reaction to things. So that's the deep roots, right? There's a Bible verse that says, the roots are down, deep down, down, down. So when there's a drought, that person, that tree doesn't care, because the roots are deep down into this water that's way underneath when you can't see the water on the surface. So what we want to talk about today is resilience. And we should be fearless when things like this happen, when whatever happens, when something else happens, when maybe you get a very scary health diagnosis or whatever. What, are you just going to fall apart? Or are you going to, come on, what are those factors that help us have that resilience? And I think, my colleagues here today, definitely within the world of chiropractic and network spinal analysis, have a lot to say about that, because the central nervous system is huge there. So I invite someone to jump right in and we'll take it from there.
Well, I'm happy to jump in. When I think about resistance or resilience, just the word adaptation comes to mind. And really, if you think about, we've talked about this in the past, all life is about adaptation. I'll take a little moment to plug a book here, The Wellness Effect. And in this book, there's actually a little formula about adaptation. And just real quickly, I'll kind of go through some of the things in it, because I think, whatever we're trying to accomplish in life, it usually involves some kind of a formula, right? Some kind of a roadmap to get there. And so in my interpretation, I think number one is awareness, like becoming aware of what's happening around in our environment and our body, because if we're not aware of things, we can't really, like if you don't know something's happening, you can't adapt, you can't make a change. So, and I think we talk about this a lot, and from our chiropractic background, is when we apply this work, it's not to feel less, it's to actually be more aware of our bodies, to adapt better, not to try to cover the signals up, but to try to enhance them so so that we can make a move and do something different. And then we need, I call it wisdom. And sometimes that wisdom is gained by our own experience. Like, oh, I've had a fever and I was okay, or, and I can do it again. Or it can be derived from, individuals who have gone down that path before. You can say, hey, we've been down this road before, let's show you how, or let's share with you. Oh my gosh, sometimes we're working with people and as they're detoxing, a rash comes out. And, normally it might be like, oh my gosh, this is wrong. I got to get away from this. And it's like, well, wait, we've been down this road and here's what's actually happening. This stuff, your skin is just one of the ways which things come out. And so it's okay. So there's some wisdom, some understanding about the process so that you don't run away from it. I always think that an important piece of the puzzle in somebody's adapting and changing is really having the desire to do so. And when I do, my talks and my webinars and my things like that, I always bring up the point that, we have to have a carrot to make changes, right? There has to be something that we want to go towards and be, that's important to us. And, for me, it's easy. It's my kids. I want to adapt myself and be the best that I can be and live the longest, healthiest, happiest life so that I can be there for my family. And I call it a joyful obligation to do that. And then, for a lot of people, you have to have a way to get where you're going. It's great to say, well, I'll adapt, but if you don't know, like, what path to take, like a roadmap, it can be challenging, because if you're going down the wrong road and it's actually taking you away from your goal, then you get frustrated and it never happens. And finally is actually executing the plan, like moving forward. So you can read this amazing book and say, wow, this is great, and then it just sits there, and then you go on doing the same thing in your life, so you don't actually adapt. So typically it helps to have a partner or a coach or a mentor or somebody to hold you accountable and be there with you. And that's kind of a formula for adaptation. And I just want to say quick before I yield the floor here, is when you talked about this a little bit, Rebecca, I think, but things will happen, right? Things are going to come along in life. And by creating, say, like if we're talking in the health realm, creating a good foundation of health, you can withstand the storm better. Like, again, in our Western culture, we tend to wait until something is broken, like, oh, my arm's about to fall off, I better go to the doctor and get it fixed. If we can build our resiliency in our strength and our vitality, which not only is a physical thing, but a mental, emotional thing, because a lot of what we're bombarded with is like the tension and the stress of like life and the situation. If we can build that up and create strength, and by strength, I also mean flexibility. And I know Matt and Tecia can talk to this point, but one of our mentors would always say, the degree of flexibility that we have in life is proportional to the degree of flexibility that we have in our structure. And if we are going through life like this, everything is hard to deal with. If we're like this, then we can roll with the punches.
Yeah, better already.
So Matt or Tecia, you might have something to say about that, because I know you guys deal in this realm.
Yeah, definitely, Gene. I love when you talked about the wisdom in the symptom. Ultimately, we say that the purpose of pain is to interrupt your life. Most people see it as just something that they want to get rid of, but pain can be anything, really.
Have you ever been swung at when you said that?
Yeah, not physically.
Great.
It's the truth, because there's wisdom in there, and having someone, like you said, having a mentor, a coach, really just someone to be a signpost along the way for you, because you are the hero of your own healing. You always will be. There's no authority that's gonna ever be able to do that for you. And so the signposts along the way are those people that you come into contact with. It's a moment like this, engaging in this type of medium and sitting with a professional or just sitting with a close friend. And when the symptom arises, when the pain arises and it interrupts things, it's for a reason. And in the office, we go and, track that back. But the important thing to understand about that is that it's not clear. And we all know that. Well, if it was that easy, I would just get rid of it, right? So we always joke and we say, it's your body's wisdom, but it's shouting at you in Russian. So you don't understand what it's saying. And if you know Russian, then don't worry, it's in Chinese. It's some other language that we don't know yet. And so it's our job to decode it.
Yeah, I think about that in terms of like a good example is cholesterol, right? So, mainstream medicine has said cholesterol is evil. Well, those of us who are in the know that cholesterol is the Lord and giver of life. Without cholesterol, you're dead. And without enough of it, you're not very healthy. But when we see a rise in cholesterol levels, we can, and nobody really knows what the optimum cholesterol level is. That was just Pfizer who said, this is it, because we sell a lot of medication that way. But it used to be called the poor man's thyroid test, right? It used to be. So, and also when you're under stress, your cholesterol rises because that's the raw material for your stress hormones. So we look at cholesterol levels like those of us who are in the know in this kind of realm, and we go, what does this tell us what's going on, other places? Maybe, does your thyroid need some support here? Do your adrenal glands need support? You're under stress. What can we do? Instead of just looking at this number and saying, oh, you have high cholesterol, let's just lower your cholesterol. What's that all about? It does nothing.
Right. I think, for all of us in the realm that we come from, it's about going upstream. Like what you're talking about, Becky, is going upstream. Like, why is this happening? And, you mentioned the same thing, Matt, and those happenings could be a toxicity, could be a food sensitivity, could be the fact that I hate my job or I hate my life. And therefore it's always going to be causing me stress. And eventually that's going to play out in our body. So it can be, as you said, Matt, a little bit challenging sometimes to figure out what is it upstream, especially, when it comes to the life stuff, because a lot of times I think there's avoidance of, really getting to the core of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when Dr. Clerkin, when you were talking about the inflexibility and the flexibility like within the system. So when I worked in Boulder, Colorado, there was a great yoga teacher that I met, and we did classes with him. And he would always say, greet inflexibility with curiosity. And that always stuck with me, because it's like, so you can't do downward dog. Okay, well, why? Maybe the attention needs to go on stretching the hamstrings a little bit better, or opening up the shoulders a little bit better, and becoming, and this plays in with the awareness piece, like becoming more aware of ourself and trusting that we can adapt and we can do what we need to do. And that's what, resilience is all about. And when it ties in with the nervous system, trusting that your body can do what it's supposed to do, whether it's physically and even more importantly, mentally and emotionally, because right now we're in this current state of panic, and fear. And I don't know if, we were talking before we got on the air about, our kids being inundated with the fear, and we've got to change this story, because it's going to change a lot of things, possibly in the negative direction if we're not careful, and if we're teaching to not trust, especially ourselves, then what will that precipitate? Like trusting the body, knowing that. So this morning I got in a disagreement with my cat, and he won. And so now I have a Band-Aid, so I have a cut, right? And so I know that, I'm not going to go to a doctor, even myself, and be like, okay, I'm going to make the cells come in and stop the blood and patch up the skin and all that stuff. I'm going to, have this Band-Aid on and to keep it from reopening. And then I'm going to trust that my body knows how to heal that. And that's the actual innate wisdom within our body that we all have. And so we get in our heads, and we think our way out of things or think our way into things. And it's very interesting because it can be detrimental or it can be beneficial. So we have to watch which direction we go. And when we become inflexible with what is going around us, maybe it's a pausing point to be like, I wonder why. Why am I so worried about this or not flexible in this state? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. My favorite poet is, one of my favorite writers is Ralph Waldo Emerson. And since you did that, I'm going to indulge myself by quoting. This is one of my favorite quotations by him because I think it speaks to this whole thing. And he says, hopefully I can do this because I'm under the gun, but trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that human string. Accept the place the divine providence has found for you. The society of your contemporaries, us, the connection of events, COVID, whatever, World War II. Great minds have always done so and confided themselves childlike to the genius of their age, betraying their perception that the eternal was stirring in their hearts, working through their hands, predominating in all their being. And we are now men, and must accept in the highest mind the same transcendent destiny, and not pinched in a corner, not cowards fleeing before a revolution, but redeemers and benefactors, pious aspirants to be noble clay under the almighty effort. Let us advance on chaos and the dark, right? Be brave. What is it about be safe? Be brave. You were born here. This is where you are. This is what you know. This is what I know you know. This is how I know you can help people, and just do it. Just do it and trust yourself. Don't be so fearful. Ralph
Absolutely.
Waldo, I love you. Yeah.
I think that's awesome. I love that. I love that you can just like put that out there. I think stress in general is probably the number one deterrent to adaptation. Because, as we've talked about and previously, when we're in that stress mode and we're in fear, stress being kind of the same thing, we're not accessing our full capability as a human being, to really navigate the situation and to like that frontal cortex, that prefrontal cortex, which is the where you can look at a situation, assess it, and make adaptation. Like, every time I eat a McDonald's hamburger, I get sick. I think I'm not going to do that anymore. That's a frontal cortex action. But when we're in that fear mode and we're stressed, we're only dealing from that reactive hindbrain survival. And in survival, we rarely are making strides to, higher levels of development and adaptation.
Right. And Emerson reminds us, if you want a lesson in creativity, follow around a 5-year-old for a day. I love that. We get so far away from that. I mean, it's absolute genius. There's no filter. They don't even have that part of the brain online yet. It's sort of, it's laying in wait for something amazing. And it's just what an opportunity. And yeah, when the fear steps in, it's tough. And resiliency is all about a dance between stability and instability.
Yeah.
So when we have stability, when we feel safe, we're secure, we're comfortable, we're naturally going to gravitate to be more curious about things. If we have instability, we'll be looking for what's going to give us stability. And usually there's an authority out there that is saying, here's your stability, here you go, this is what you need for it. And I would caution that because we're talking about creativity here, and that, creativity is born of connection. And so again, if you want a lesson in connection, follow that same 5-year-old around for a day and see what they, look at. I mean, they'll stare at a leaf or a flower for the better part of 20 minutes sometimes if you get them in the right moment. It's just, they'll get completely engrossed in that.
I still have memories as a child looking into a mud puddle. I can still smell it in my memory.
Yep. So important. We forget that. When was the last time you jumped into a mud puddle laughing? When was the last time you got your boots a little wet? These things are really valuable. It seems trivial and kind of silly, like, oh, okay, but the truth is that we're wired for that stuff. And it's also a disruptor. It will actually disrupt what's going on in the nervous system so that we can reset. What an opportunity.
Mm.
Pretty easy too. Next time it's throwing down rain, run outside. I mean,
One thing I think of is necessity is the mother of invention. So I think problems are great to have because problems force you to think and force you to be innovative and force you to have to, I will just like refer to when I was taking care of my mother in our 20s, we were taking care of my mom with early Alzheimer's. So here I am in my 20s, I'm newly married and I have a mother in diapers living with us. And so this isn't easy, but I had a really wonderful, I have nothing but fond memories of that time because it wasn't all about that, right? It was just, you had your joy, your peace, and you were just dealing with what is. But I remember, trying to get her into the shower. So because when people have Alzheimer's, they can't follow like a command, right? But they can really follow instinct. So I'd be like, Mom, step up, like step in, right? No, can't do it. And then I'd say, wow, look at that bird outside the window. And then just go like this. And she could do it because she was working on reflex. But like, I learned that because I had to. I had to. So bad stuff happens. It always will. But we cannot feel like we are hostage to it. Come on.
yeah.
Resilience. We have so much within us. And if we nurture ourselves and take care of ourselves, we'll be there so that we can show up every day and do whatever it is we need to do.
I think when I look at, because a lot of like when we work with people in our office, it's around, this concept of there's a clinical aspect that's important, but equally as important is a person's ability to make changes in their life and adapt and be a different person than they were when they came in. Because you can do everything right clinically, whether it's chiropractic or nutrition or herbs or whatever, but if something doesn't fundamentally change about who that person was and how they be in life, you obviously would expect to land up in the same place. And I think, one of the things is that when people have tried to make changes, maybe they didn't have the right tools or strategies, were unsuccessful, and especially if it's happened a number of times, that unsuccessfulness becomes sort of like a pattern, which then can create a barrier to moving forward in the future. A lot of people have like, well, I've tried everything, so I'm giving up. Pass me the donuts. And I look at, as I'm looking behind Dr. Tecia Abatelli, I see a poster up there on the wall that has, if you can't see it from the audience, but has it's a triad. One of them is structure, the other one's perception and behavior, and the relationship of those things. So like in our office, what we do is we set up a structure so that people don't have to set up their own structure and think about, well, what do I need to do? What do I need to eat? How do we do this? Like, we just say, okay, we've got the structure set. All you've got to do is participate in the behavior. And then by doing that, that changes the perception. So I think, having an awareness and a formula, or figuring out your own personal style, or having somebody help you figure that out is an important thing, because a lot of times, it's like, well, I've tried that and it just didn't work for me. There's probably something missing in your formula there.
Yeah. And I think makes me think of this client, my first person with cancer back in 2007. And I think I've mentioned it before, but what I want to say is he did really, really well. Stage 4 inoperable prostate cancer. And, we worked together for about 6 weeks and it was 85% in remission. He did 5 weeks of radiation. And I mean, I just talked to him the other day. This was 2007. But what happened was he became a different person. He was a very successful man, right? And had a lot of money and all that kind of stuff. And when he got cancer, like his girlfriend said, cancer is the best thing that happened to Harry because it changed the way he was as a person. He just started giving stuff away. And, he just felt generous. It changed his whole person. So if we are working with somebody and we can change things according to our clinical practices, whether it be nutrients or herbs or whatever, or chiropractic, whatever, if you don't make that fundamental change yourself that Dr. Jean was talking about, you know, that's the opportunity. Something bad happens, it's an opportunity for you to learn, to change, to thrive. We had a discussion in our life group from church on Monday night, and they're like, what's causing you anxiety and stuff? And because people know I'm all worked up about this because I'm very in a lot of righteous anger. And I'm like, I don't have any anxiety at all. And those two things seem like that doesn't seem congruous. But you can be really passionate about something. You can be really angry about something. You can be really working on something, and it just fires you up and makes you more joyful. It doesn't make you anxious. So I think that's the thing too, is engaging in life and realizing that we are not to react. We are to proact. We are to take the reins and, you know, take the things God has given us in our health and the faculties we have, and just go with it and enjoy it. You might be fighting a horrible enemy, but enjoy it at the same time.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tecia.
It's a really good point with the anxiety piece of it, and we're learning like anxiety and depression are some of the biggest, or the two biggest mental health disorders that are, like, if you want to say plaguing or pandemicking our society, it's those two, and it's even bigger than this current virus pandemic. And it's interesting that you say that. We do have a gentleman in our office that is suffering from anxiety and depression, and he's on medications. And we were having a conversation about, you know, what are you doing that's different during this time? You have a lot of downtime, and like, you know, are things changing for you? Because you look a lot better. You know, you look like you've been working out. And he's like, no, not really. And I go, okay, well, we have the conversation. He's like, well, how do you get motivated to want to work out? And I was like, you just gotta, you can get an accountability buddy, which we've already discussed, you know, get a group of friends and do a thing, and like have a competition who can work out the most, or, you know, set a goal to do it 3 times a week if that works, or just get up and do 5 push-ups, you know, just something to make you feel successful. And I thought about it later afterwards, and I was like, okay, so he's on some anti-anxiety medications. Maybe that's the reason why, because we think that medication is designed for that one thing, right? So we take ibuprofen because, let's say, our knee hurts or something, or we have a headache or something, you know, an ache or a pain, right? So we think, oh, I take the ibuprofen and it totally like made the pain go away in my knee. Well, you don't have pain everywhere else, so you're not realizing that it's the full body. But what if you have all like aches and pains throughout your body? You take ibuprofen, it helps everything, right? It's not specific to what is just in one spot that hurts. Just like anti-anxiety medication doesn't work with just anxiety, it's working with all emotion, whether it's joy, whether it's motivation, whether, you know, it's frustration. I mean, you don't feel anything. And so I got to thinking, I was like, that is such an interesting, you know, thing. And we work with the intelligences of the body, and emotion is one of them. It's the second level of, like, connective tissue is your bioenergy, your survival. And then you have emotion, and then it goes up into the mind. It progresses, and emotion is just being blocked. And I don't think we really realized that. It was just an interesting concept to think about. And when we have something we don't like, we want to get rid of it. So therefore, we go to the medical doctor and say, I don't like this anymore. And they're like, well, here's a medication. It's going to cover it up. You know, they don't say that, but, you know, the idea is I'm going to make it go away by covering it up and not really getting to the root cause of why you have anxiety in the first place.
Yeah. It reminds me of what you're saying, Dr. Tecia. My mother-in-law had agoraphobia. Okay. So that's kind of like, she just would, you know, being in crowds, that whole thing. Right. So at one point in time, she was prescribed Paxil, which is one of the SSRIs, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibiting drugs. Paxil is kind of like favored for that kind of thing, that kind of depression, but with that type of anxiety. But you know, she was on it for a little while and she was like, you know, seriously, if I found out my best friend had died, I couldn't cry.
Mm.
I could not cry. And she was like, I can't take this. I mean, I'm just like, I just have no, I can't experience emotions. And it's like, it's not okay.
You know, I think emotions, you know, you had mentioned this, Tecia, if you're blocked, if your emotions are blocked, advertisers know this, that people don't move based on information. They move based on emotion. Emotion is what moves us to do anything in life.
Mm-hmm.
And when we've cut those emotions off and we're just like this flat line, it's very unlikely that you'll adapt in life and be resilient, because there's no change. There's no energy there really to move you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So every given moment of every given day, your nervous system is really asking one critical question. It's always assessing, am I safe? Constantly. So if you are, great. Peace, joy, love, purpose beyond self, you're connecting with other people. If you're not, got stress physiology, fear, a lot of those little ankle biters, the self-sabotage patterns, well, I'm not going to try this because I failed, and I'll probably, or it's usually deeper than that, like I failed again, that type of a thing, you know, so we really tend to avoid those. And so we're wondering, am I safe, am I not? So we're talking a little bit about, you know, sort of like we buy on emotion, you know, so what we're being sold constantly every day, and, you know, the advertisers are very aware of this, you know, am I safe? Well, stay tuned and find out. We don't know. We don't know. Maybe, you know, it's this threat, this, or, you know, the next, like, whatever thing. Doesn't really matter what it is. Just thinking about this more contextually. So it's constantly like, well, we're not sure if you're safe, and maybe this and maybe that. And it doesn't matter if it's like a, you know, whatever, you know, political thing, or a, you know, consumer thing, or a health thing. Like, it's all the same workings, basically. And I was curious if it might be all right if I went through a little self-assessment, because we're talking about, you know, like the ability to connect with emotion and other things. So we work with different intelligences that run through the connective tissue around the nervous system. And I was wondering if we could just take a moment here to go through a few of those, and then do, okay, and this will be like a little, so something you can do at home, you know, rubber meets the road. I love that stuff. And this is obviously like a very social science translation of what we do. And I love that stuff, because if you can't translate it, then it's like, it's only as good as what your understanding is. So, and I think, you know, as we all know, and if you're watching this, you already know this, the more you're on this path of, you know, conscious health, the more you understand, the more you're able to translate, and then you become a resource for everyone else around you. And that's really important right now, because the era of like the guru, the era of like the authority taking care of you, it's over. Like, it's over. It's about you. It's about your connection with other people. It's about friends. It's about, you know, walking the path that you're on, authentic to yourself, and then holding each other accountable. We always say in the office, you know, bust my rut or pop my bubble, like, help me get out of this thing. You know, I've got a wall here or whatever. And we're really good about that. So self-assessment, right? And so Dr. Tecia, I'll kind of piggyback a little bit too on the, on that one example you gave about, you know, a patient who's, you know, dealing with a certain thing. So we look at basically like 6 different, if we accordion out what runs through the human experience, and these are all measurable. We can measure this very easily on surface EMG about how this moves through the nervous system, and more importantly, the connective tissue. Fascinating stuff. If you want to learn more about that, we'll be at the farmers market here in Keene tomorrow. Stop by, we'll talk. The first thing is the bioenergetic, and what we would call is the life force. You know, it's an intelligence in the body. It's what governs your blood cells, your bone marrow, your respiratory rate, heart rate, ability to digest. So how you can do a self-assessment for this is someone who has really good access to their bioenergetic intelligence is someone who, you know, they don't need a lot of sleep. They can get away with 4 hours. They don't get sick. They have a ton of energy. They can pretty much eat whatever they want. Like, they just don't really break down. You know, so we all know those people. I could say that's not me. I have to work a little bit harder at my energetic intelligence so that I have what I need. But that's kind of like the barometer there. So, and the example, I guess, then of if you need more work in that zone is you have to pay attention to what you eat. You have to monitor your sleep. You have to stay properly hydrated. There's most likely supplementation that you really benefit from, and you notice a difference when you do engage. So that's when you're a little bit more challenged. So the next one is emotional intelligence. So this was the example we gave with, medication for a specific experience, but having a global effect on the whole nervous system and ultimately our interaction experience of life. So if you have an intact emotional intelligence and that's a resource for you, you're able to take action. Really easy. Just, all of a sudden it comes to you, you think about someone, you pick up the phone, bam, call them, and like the deal is right there. This is the person that you can think of who, let's just say, it's like you're standing around, with a group of friends, maybe you're at the park or whatever, and you're talking about, a coworker or something, and it's like, they're like number one in sales or something like that in the office. And it's like, not for nothing, but like, I don't know how they do it. Like, it's not like they're all that smart, but yet they're crushing it. Like, what is the deal with this person? And the truth is, because they have amazing access to their emotional intelligence. They don't necessarily overthink it at all, because someone who doesn't, as soon as they're like, oh, I should call this person, the mind comes like, well, maybe they're not around, or they're not available, or maybe I'll wait till tomorrow, maybe that'll be better. Like, that's a challenge in emotional intelligence. It's not a good thing or bad thing, but if you know that you have a challenge in emotional intelligence, then don't judge yourself for not being able to take immediate action. The self-assessment. So the next two are kind of grouped together, and this is when we start looking at the emotional feel. So we have and this isn't like a lower or higher, it's really just one big continuum and everything overlaps and is woven together. But for purpose of just explaining it, there's a lower mental intelligence and an upper mental intelligence that we look at in terms of how they move through the body. So the lower mental is our ability for facts, for details, for remembering people's names, remembering numbers, just bam, 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 bam. It's always right there at the top. If you have a challenge with that, it's not, the details are sort of not really there. You have to spend some time, maybe you need to review before you go. You got to ask, who are these people's names before you walk into the party, that type of a thing. And most likely you're asking, a friend or close confidant who has great access to lower mental. And then the upper mental intelligence is our ability to see a big picture. So if seeing the big picture is easy for you, great. Like, you have access to, that upper mental intelligence, and oftentimes they'll go hand in hand. So people will have sort of access to both. And what I like to say is that you most likely do have more than one of these, a great resource in. And I'll get to why that's important in a second. The last two are a little more esoteric. We talk about the soul intelligence through the body. That's just, think about connection beyond self, synchronicity. We all have that experience of like, man, right place, right time, like click, date opens, doors on hinges, like, man, everything is just humming today. Like, that person gave me my coffee for free. There was, 50 cents left in the meter. It's just like, there's a perfect spot. Everything is just like boom, 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 boom. You're just totally on the beam. Like, that's where, of course, we all want to be. That's that soul intelligence. People who have that intact, that's a tremendous gift. It's meant to be shared. And then, of course, after that is just the, really the governing, the universal, that goes by so many amazing names and has so many traditions that honor that and explore that. So the self-assessment is for understand where you have resource and then go with what works. If the emotion, so in the example that you gave, Dr. Tecia, was someone, so what would we do in that case? If someone doesn't have access to that emotional intelligence, whether it's chemically induced or it's just, that's not one of their primary ways of dealing with things in life, we have to figure out like, well, what is? Do they have great access to bio? Are they really good with detail? Do they have big picture? Are they like synchronicity is just bam, no matter what they do? Whatever it is in that self-assessment that I just gave that you have access to, that's what you want to amplify with. Because ultimately, when you basically engage in that and amplify that, everything else comes up also. It's like all boats rise together.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah, preach it, brother.
So
it's so interesting. The synchronicity, it was so interesting. So there's this guy, he's a pastor in this area, but he has built a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, and some of you might know who I'm talking about. And you don't have to say so or not, but it was very interesting because talking about synchronicity, I had one of my clients who I've known about him for years, and because we've shared in the care of whatever. And she was here the other day, and she was my last person of the day, and we got talking about it. And I said, well, tell me about this chamber. And he built it, and I'm go, blah, blah, blah. We got talking about it. We probably spent the last 15 minutes, and she had no sooner had I seen her back walk out my door than the phone rang, and it was this man. And I'm going to meet with him this afternoon at 2:00
Awesome.
in person. But the really cool thing was that he said, all of the people that you work with, their pH is perfect. It's 7.5. Every single person. You're dealing with cancer, you're doing this, their pH is perfect. And I'm like, well, that's good to know, because I never even tested anybody's pH. I really wasn't thinking about that. But it's kind of like the things we do that for whatever reason we're doing. But it was just like bizarre that we had just been talking about him, and he called me and he said, I just had this impetus that I just need to call you right now. And I'm like, that's really crazy.
Emotional intelligence, bam.
Yeah. Cool.
That's super creative. Well, it's funny because in the chiropractic realm, one of our favorite mentors, who's no longer with us anymore, but he writes a book about like the philosophy of chiropractic. Like, a lot of people have a misconception that chiropractic is a religion or a cult, but it's not. It's a philosophy. And there's an art, like how you give an adjustment, what's your modality of an adjustment, the science, the research to back it up, and then the philosophy, like what do you believe with it. And I was reading it this morning. So it's called the Triune of Life. My former boss would be really proud. It's an interesting mindset to talk about the different intelligences or the different governing bodies within our makeup. And I just want to read 2 quick paragraphs talking about 2 different, 2 different ways to look at the intelligences. So the power to reason and decide upon a course of action in accordance with that reason, the ability to remember, the faculty to form value judgments are all manifestations of an intelligence which man himself controls. This is called the educated mind. So more in the lower mental intelligence. Its quality and quantity vary greatly from person to person, and it can be enhanced by learning or damaged by illness. And it deals with the external matter. So educated mind deals with things that are external, that come in. And then the inborn wisdom is any living thing which maintains its parts in active organization for the purpose of function. And it's called the innate intelligence. I'll get to that. This intelligence is responsible for all things internal. So I personally like to think of the innate intelligence as the Force, because I'm a huge Star Wars nerd and I love the Force. And like, as Yoda always says, you know, the Force, use the Force. It's in and around all things. It's that power that we all have. And the innate intelligence, like I said, is responsible for all things internal, and it makes the upper teeth, you know, grow downward and our lower teeth grow upward, right? It increases heart rate when we walk upstairs. It regulates the action of some 250 different glands simultaneously. It maintains and coordinates dozens of organs, hundreds of muscles, thousands of miles of blood vessels, and countless trillions of cells. And it never sleeps, and it cannot be injured. It is as great in a moron as it is in a genius. And it's always 100% in every living thing, from the most complex down to the simplest unicellular particle of life. Even a virus has innate intelligence. A blade of grass has innate intelligence. Everything has an intelligence, an organizing wisdom in and of itself. And we doubt that a lot when our educated mind comes into play. So when, you know, Dr. Matt, when we're talking about like the intelligences that we work within the body, that's another set of intelligences that we have within our system. And when we perpetuate fear or we perpetuate joy in our life, it plays out in different ways. If we take medication to hinder or stop us from feeling something we don't want to feel, it's going to show up in another way because the body's trying to tell you, like Dr. Matt said, you know, it's your body yelling at you in Russian or Chinese or whatever it might be. We have to trust, like start trusting that we are innately intelligent, whether we think it or not, you know, and being the resilience part comes into that. And so what I like about, you know, chiropractic, that philosophy is working with that innate intelligence, and we test to see like how are your nerves working, you know, and we have the ability to test what is going on and how is your system functioning on the inside, the aspects of your body that you don't even control. There's an autonomic system, and it's voluntary and involuntary. Like breathing, it's involuntary and voluntary. We don't have to think about it all the time. Thank goodness, right? Our heart rate, like if we had to think about breathing every second of the day, we'd all die, like in seconds. Oh shoot, I forgot, you know, already dead.
Yeah, I'm supposed to breathe.
Right, dang it. Why? Our heart rate, thank goodness that's involuntary. It's something that just happens. We don't tell it to do it. The body just knows. It's that intelligence. I see Matt freezing but excited. Did you want to say something? Oh, he's kind of frozen.
I kind of wanted to bring in, like, from an herbal kind of thing. We were talking about doctrine of signatures last week, and how different plants tell us that what they do for us, they tell us because of what they do for themselves. So I had talked about the dandelion. It's a great time of year to talk about dandelion, right? Because it's right there. And yeah. I thought this was really cool. I found this good therapy. Flowers are a fitting metaphor for how different children respond to the environments they're raised in. According to new research from the University of Arizona, dandelion children can adapt to a variety of environments and do quite well. But orchid children are far more sensitive to context, withering in poor environments and blooming in robust ones. This biological sensitivity to context has to do with how kids naturally relate to environmental stress, and it influences both their psychological and physical well-being. Orchid children in positive homes do exceptionally well, often outshining their peers. But these same children in rougher surroundings are more prone to depression, substance abuse, and crime. Sadly, this latter group is in greater need of counseling and therapeutic support, but less likely to have access to it. Just food for thought. I mean, I thought that was so interesting because one of the great reasons to get your dandelion greens and be doing that right now is this is a wonderful tonic plant that will do for you what it does for itself, which is increase that, I guess, innate resiliency, that foundational. It's not like you have a UTI, so we're going to use Over-Urzi and try to overcome that in an acute situation. This is a plant that helps your system be resilient because that's what it does for itself. It survives anything. And really kind of cool. Dandelion medicine.
I love it. That's so cool. And you know, you think like the dandelion, nobody goes up and tells each dandelion to close up at night and then open back up in the morning. That's innate intelligence. That's what it's designed to do. And the fact that it has the medicinal properties to help our body. I mean, let food be thy medicine. Let everything we need not only is provided in the earth, but it's provided within ourselves. Like we have a whole pharmacy within our body. It just has to be connected and fully function. Like serotonin, you know, stopping serotonin or having serotonin, we produce serotonin in the brain, you know? And so we have everything we need. There are times when we need that external guidance through like emergency medicine. You get in a car accident, you know, and you break your arm, gosh, go to the hospital, you know, you're going to need additional aid, you know, that is so necessary. It's just trying to get the understanding that we can do anything we need within ourselves, and we can be resilient with any situation that comes at us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's if you observe nature, and if you listen to yourself, you kind of know that I don't do well with this. I crave that. If you, oh gosh, I can't think of his name, but he wrote the Vermont Country Medicine or whatever. Jarvis. You guys probably are familiar with him. Vermont Country Folk Medicine or whatever. But he like basically was out in the woods and he was just look at what animals would do when they were sick. What would they eat? What would they not eat? What would they, whatever. And interestingly enough, every culture has really figured out how to use plant medicine, whether it be the Asians or the Indians, the Western Indians or the Indian, Ayurvedic medicine, the plants that are around you. How did we figure out how to do that? How did that happen? Because there is that innate wisdom. There is something there. There's the curiosity that Jean was talking about earlier, Dr. Jean, and just how does that happen? Just listen and be aware and be in tune, because that's how we were created, to understand things. And we don't all have to go to college and study herbal medicine to get that.
Right. And the same thing will show up on other sides of the planet. It's incredible. That wisdom will show up in peoples that would have never, ever come into contact with each other. And yet they're both right around the same time on the planet. I mean, you go through the history books, it's just wild. I mean, I don't believe in coincidence. I can't explain that sort of a thing, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I saw there was one question here. It'd be cool if we answer one question. It's about dandelion. It's a question from Jean, just saying, can we eat dandelion after they've turned to the fuzzy tops? So, well, Jean, if you're looking for dandelion fritters, no. And I highly recommend them, actually. If you haven't eaten a dandelion fritter in your life, you are missing out. Yeah, when they're fresh and loaded with pollen, oh my goodness. Yeah, highly recommended. The whole plant's edible, of course. I would say yes. That's a good question, because there's a lot of wild edibles that when they do go to seed, you need to be cautious. Dandelion's not one of them. If anything, it's just going to get a little bit more bitter, but you can absolutely still eat it. If you're worried about the bitter, use less of it and put it in whatever your soups or your stews are. But that's a really good question. The other thing to consider with wild edibles is make sure they're at least 35 feet away from a roadside.
Yeah.
Because you're going to, we talked about how it pulls up from the soil. So dandelion is one of those that you need to be really conscious about where it's growing, and just, take a look around, use your awareness, get curious. What's around here? How's the water moving? How does the wind tend to go? What else is growing here? Do dogs come through here a lot? Start asking some questions. And if you check off all the boxes and it feels good, I mean, what an opportunity. That stuff's expensive in the store and it grows up in your yard. Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, you have to think about that. And that's why people will say to me, well, do you grow your own herbs? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, we have so many herbal tinctures here, but I can't verify where plants are locally grown. I can't do that. I can't just pick up yarrow off the roadside and say, oh, here, I'll make you a tincture of this, because like exactly what you said, you have to have, some standards of control when it comes to that kind of thing. But if you're in the country and you've got dandelion there, your backyard is like, you don't put pesticides down there, you haven't put Roundup, you don't use any of that stuff, and you're not over, you're in a nice place. Yeah, go for it. Dr. Jean.
By the way, if any of the rest of the audience, if you have any questions, we didn't mention this earlier, but you can put them in the Q&A box and we would address those. And I don't think any of us are monitoring the Facebook feeds, right?
No. Hop on Zoom if you want to get in touch.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you put a question in the feed there, we'll get back to you later on that. But if you're on the Zoom platform.
And also, you can reach out to any of us. You can go to our Facebook page, Proactive Health Collective of Keene, and just give us a message, or send to any of us on our websites. We have Natural Health, we have Basic Balance of Keene, Allison Miller, we have Cheshire Wellness and Wondrous Roots, and just say, we'd love to have you talk about this or that. And but I think, just love to say, we have so much more power than we think we do. We are not as sick as we think we are. We are not as vulnerable as we think we are. And I think just coming from a position of confidence right there raises your health up such a bar. Right up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, again, we didn't want to talk too much about like COVID stuff today. We're sort of moving on from that. But, again, it's challenges like your gentleman who had cancer, like Becky, that she worked with, and we've all had this experience. That cancer was his gift, right? That cancer changed his life. And so all these things that we have that are challenges, we don't like them. We don't want to get cancer, right? But whatever does come our way gives us the opportunity, as long as we are resilient and adaptable and flexible, to be able to step back and look at it and get something from it. If we're always fighting against the challenge, and the challenge is, we're looking at it as something that's trying to get us versus what is that opportunity, it's much more challenging to adapt when we think of it that way, like we're the victim of this challenge. If we think of it like, okay, what is it? How is this part of my, my ability to grow and to change and adapt? Now, I think just by that mindset, you're able to look at it differently and take a totally different approach and have a different outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would indulge me with one more Emerson quote.
Sure.
Okay. Ralph Waldo. Okay, so what I must do is all that concerns me, not what the people think. This rule, equally arduous in actual and intellectual life, may prove to be the whole distinction between greatness and meanness. It is the harder because you will always find those who think they know what is your duty better than you know it. It is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. It is easy in solitude to live after one's own. But the great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude. Love that.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. How we thrive, survive, that's how we're resilient. It comes from within. And it's a strength that we say, hey, blow the harder, just blow it on me, dude. And if I die, I die, but I'm going to go down fighting. Yeah.
It's all worth it. Death is part of life, The question is, how long do we get on this earth, and in what state are we when we go? And we have that choice to decide.
Do we limp along in fear, or do we just say, come on, have at it. Let's just
Your choice.
Let's go.
Both choices are a strategy, right? Both of those are a strategy. How am I going to deal with this? Well, I can just sort of limp along and see what comes my way, or I can, like buckle up and, start moving.
You can be Eeyore or you can be Tigger. You can be Eeyore
right.
or you can be Tigger.
Right. Real quick here at the end. So action steps are really important. And we've talked a little bit about having someone to hold you accountable. And then, just the more you saturate yourself with, there's no shortage of information out there. It's not about getting more information, but it is about spending time with the people and the resources that inspire you. It's the old adage, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. I mean, you truly are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And if that's Facebook and a news channel, those are included in that. It's virtual now. It's not only just the people. So think about that one. And real quick here, so strategy. Tony Robbins talks about strategy in a way that I really love. And he talks about, strategy and sustainable strategy. So basically, a strategy is something that works each and every time, all the time. You or a Tigger, they're both going to work, And a sustainable strategy is something that, again, works each and every time, all the time, and it liberates energy over time. In other words, it makes you stronger. So we all know those things that we can do for ourselves that liberate energy, that make us stronger, that make us fuller, bring us more alive, give us more variety in our life, make us feel more, secure and comfortable because we are more connected, which makes us be more creative. So whatever those things are for you, and you don't need us to tell you, you've got your list. So whatever they are, take them off the shelf and think about what are some sustainable strategies, because sustainable is long-term. Resiliency is a short-term, it's an acute situation. That shows genius. sustainability long term. And those sustainable strategies are the ones that are really going to carry you through. And you all know what to do.
Well said. Well, with that, I would say happy Memorial Day weekend, everybody. It's beautiful weather out there. Love you, my colleagues, and this has been really fun. And thanks for participating and being there. And it looks like we did have a few comments.
They got handled.
You got it? Do you see it?
Yeah, Matt basically answered the question, and they were just
Okay,
comments
cool.
there. So
Cool.
All right, well, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. And have a great, we'll be back next Friday at 11 o'clock.
All right.
Um,
Happy
back to
Memorial Day.
15.
happy
Thank
Memorial
you.
Day.
Love you all.
All right, bye.
So long.
Bye.